doing? How's it going? How are things? Thank you for all the comments and the interactions. It's very much appreciated. Happy birthday to one of us who shall remain nameless, but they know who they are. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to... Happy birthday to you. Not quite Marilyn Monroe, but anyway. How are you all doing? How are you getting on? We're nearly there. We're nearly through with December. We've just got another, 14 days left? Another 2 weeks. We'll be fine. We've got this. We've got this. All steam ahead for doing a live read on Christmas Day. I'm still going to go ahead and do that. As I said, don't forget, it's going to be in shifts. So if you miss it, don't worry. They'll be in the live section of the live playlist section. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. So... are you going to do a meal on day? If you do, what do you have? What do you have? What's your favourite thing? Now, I don't do the whole sort of like day meal and trimmings and all that malarkey. I don't do it. But I never understood it. You know, you see these people like... When I was at college, one of the jobs I did was I would work at Tesco's, you know, part-time. Well, part-time, it was practically full-time, you know. What I never understood is you see people with their trolleys and they're right the way up the aisles and that sort of thing. And I worked in every department because, well, you know, overtime. But you see them right the way up the aisles with the trolleys piled high with all this food. And there's like two people and you're thinking, are you going to be feeding the 5,000 or are you going to be bunkering up for the next 3 weeks? If that's just one day, come on now. I know you're supposed to celebrate with a meal, but seriously now. But anyway, you know, and you always get this thing about people saying, oh no, I've had to have turkey for the last week. Well, just get a turkey leg then and roast that. Well, Anyway. Tell me how you're doing. Tell me how you're getting on. And tell me what you're going to have to eat on day. If you're going to do a meal. And if you're not going to do a meal, tell me what your favourite winter warming soup is. Yeah. I was asked the question this week about cock-a-leekie soup. 10 points if anybody can actually name in the comments section exactly what goes into cock-a-leekie soup and where it comes from. Yes. I know. Do you? I'm in a really silly mood. I'm just looking forward to a new year. There's going to be a lot of challenges. We all know this, but we're going to go hurtling towards it with spite and vinegar and bloody-minded determination. Like every other year, really, you know. Right then, my lovelies, without further ado, we've got a bit of a chapter. Is it going to be a big chapter? Let's have a double check. Oh no, it's only a dinky one, so we'll get on and get it done. Right, chapter 10. Here comes the sun. By our beloved Mr. Tom Holt. Ah, said Jane briskly. I was hoping I'd get a chance to have a word with you. Ganger's hand had been on the door handle. He froze. Then he turned around and smiled. Sure, he said. Look, just got to make a few quick calls and... It won't take a moment, I promise, Jane replied grimly. You could have sharpened chisels on her tone of voice, so that Ganger subsided and seemed to lose about an inch in height. Fine, he said. Come on in. Although she'd spent the last 2 hours waiting for Ganger outside his office, this was the first time she'd actually been inside it. She wasn't impressed. An office, her expression clearly said, so what? The fact that it has recording angels instead of dictaphones makes it different, not necessarily better. Ganger wilted a little more. If he'd had petals, some of them would have fallen off by now. He perched, nevertheless, on the edge of the desk and waved to a chair. Oh, what's all this about, then? He asked. Just one or two things, Jane replied. She dipped into her bag and brought out 2 copies of a neatly typed list. Ganger's smile became a windscreen. First, she said, I thought that perhaps we ought to get straight exactly what it is I'm doing here. You're doing fine, Ganger said quickly. Next question. Jane glazed her expression of respectful contempt to the consistency of ceramic armour plate. Thank you so much, she said. But I asked what, not how. What's my job description? Precisely. Ganger sucked his cheeks in slightly. Well, he said, I don't know about you, but I'm all for flexibility in these things. You know, the broad outlook, the adaptable definition, the overall view. Yes, Jane said. I'm sure you are. It wouldn't do if we were all alike, would it? For a moment, Ganga's perennial smile had a lot of big sharp teeth in it, which hadn't been there a moment ago. And then he recovered himself. Fair enough, he said. Well, I suppose we could say. I thought management trainee, Jane interrupted. Oh, by the way, you don't mind if I take a few notes, do you? It does so help when you're trying to remember what you said later on. Ganga's throat moved slightly, as if he were swallowing a small plum-stone. No, he said. You go ahead. That's fine. Well, yes, I suppose management trainee covers it more or less, you know, in general terms, bearing in mind that... Next, Jane continued, I think it's time we had a little chat about salary, don't you? The upturned corners of Ganga's lips flickered briefly. Salary? He repeated. That's right, Jane said. I've been asking around and... I beg your pardon? I've been asking around, Jane said, with very slightly exaggerated clarity, and the general opinion seems to be, you've been asking people what they earn. That's right, and just walking up to them and asking. Exactly. Now, and they've actually told you. Yes, said Jane, and the impression I get, and of course you'll correct me if I'm wrong, is that the going rate for junior management in this setup is 25,000 cruises per annum. That seems reasonable enough, doesn't it? Ganga sat monolithically on the desktop with his mouth open. Subject, Jane went on quickly, to upwards review every 6 months, naturally. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about, there was a noise from the back of Ganga's throat. He croaked. I'm sorry. 25,000 cruisers, Ganga said. My dear girl. It was unequivocally the wrong thing to say. To do him credit, Ganga realised this before the fatal words were more than just a few inches out of his mouth, but by then it was too late. Before he could speak again, Jane's eyes filmed over with permafrost and her lips set in an invisible line. Right, Ganga said, in a very small voice. Yes, that's fine. I'll see to that straight away. Yes, absolutely. Now then, was there something else? Yes, Jane said. Please don't think I'm complaining, but it does seem a bit of a waste of my time to have to commute here from Wimbledon every single morning. I have to change trains twice just to get to the Stellarport, and then there's all that hanging about getting through customs. I'm sure we can do something about that, Ganga said quickly. I could have a word with the guards, you know. I was thinking, Jane said, ignoring him completely, about a relocation allowance, plus super-terrestrial waiting, of course, because... She stopped speaking. Ganga had gone a very funny colour. He said, look, I'm going to have to talk to some of my colleagues about that because... Alternatively, Jane said, I gather there's going to be a staff flat falling vacant soon in the basement of the weather building. I could have that, couldn't I? Ganga had agreed enthusiastically before he suddenly realised that he'd been out-gambited. He opened his mouth to speak and then subsided. Just a few more things, Jane went on. Holidays, normal working hours, pension scheme, that sort of thing. We might as well clear them up now while we're on the subject, don't you think? There was a long silence, and Jane could feel Ganga trying to prise a way into her mind. For all the world like a psychological double-glazing salesman, she put the chin firmly on the door of her subconscious and gave him a look. Yes, he said quickly. Why not? I suppose, he added, you had something in mind. As it happens, Jane replied pleasantly. Yes. Now then. The work we do here, said the director, is specialised, very specialised. He pressed a button on the console and the far wall of the enormous room flickered and became one huge screen. At first sight, while Jane's eyes were getting used to the brightness, it looked blank. Then she realised that it was cross-hatched with millions of tiny fine lines connected to hundreds of thousands of minute points of pink and blue light. Each little light, the director went on, represents one of our clients. We like to call them clients, because we feel that above all we strive to offer a personalised service. Jane thought about the name of the department. Office of the Director of Star-Crossed Lovers. I felt the urge to protest. But she didn't. Ah, she said. The pink dots, the director went on, are our lady clients, and the blue ones are, of course, the gentlemen. The lines connecting them are what we call the fate lines. You'll see, he went on, pointing at the screen with a lecturer's stick, that one tends to get a few patterns emerging on a fairly regular basis. Now, here, he said, pointing, we've got a classic eternal triangle. Lovely example, this. You'll notice all three sides are precisely the same length. Quite rare nowadays. Really? Jane said. Gosh. Yes, the director stood speechless for a moment, transported by the geometrical perfection of the thing. Remarkable specimen, all things considered. When they're that precise, the links are quite extraordinarily strong. I'm writing a paper on them as it happens, he added diffidently. Just a little monograph, of course, but I flatter myself, not without a certain intrinsic interest. Absolutely, Jane said. The pointer moved to another sector of the screen. And this, the director said, with a glow of pride, is a quite lovely example of an H-A syndrome major. Bless my soul, yes, he added, leaning forward and squinting. Exquisite. Just look at those reciprocities. Jane coughed slightly. H-A, she asked. It's short for Heloise Ablard, the director explained, although there's a tendency in some circles nowadays to call them R-J's. Romeo-Juliet's, Jane hazarded. That's right, said the director with slight distaste. But really, that's a misnomer, because properly speaking, the R-J minor syndrome is an entirely separate and self-contained subgroup with its own characteristic matrix of tension. They're quite rare, unlike H-A's, which are quite common in their natural state. Now there's something I want you to see. Look! He directed Jane's attention to what looked to her like a small, perfectly symmetrical spider's web, with 4 or 5 separate points of pink and blue light flickering desolately in the meshes. Jane swallowed hard. Classic trifoliate misunderstanding, the director said, with an impacted rebound. Just here, look, they're completely self-explanatory once you get the hang of them, of course. For a moment, Jane couldn't quite grasp what he meant. Then, as she concentrated on the spider's web, it all became luckily clear. The 2 brightest points of the light were palpably the original clients, but the thread that had originally joined them was hanging loose, broken in 2 equilateral parts. Around each original client there was a separate web into which another client had been drawn, the rebound presumably, thereby creating another little separate vortex of misery for the jilted partner, who should have been linked up to the reboundee. Now, from a distance, the overall pattern was immediately apparent and infinitely depressing. The wonderful thing about this particular formation, the director was saying, is that where conditions are right, potentially the pattern is infinitely self-repeating. It just goes on and on and on, duplicating itself over and over again. He uttered a small, weak academic laugh. We sometimes say it has a life of its own, but of course that's not exactly and exactly true. Eventually, something happens to break the sequence, and then the whole thing grinds to a halt. Yes, it's a pity in a way, the director sighed. It's such an intellectually satisfying configuration, in my opinion. Not like this, he added, pointing at another section of the screen. Jane looked across and saw something which immediately put her in mind of what usually happened to expensive pairs of tights.
This, said the director, with a perceptible curl of the lip, is what we call an HBH convergence.
Right, Jane said. HBH standing for
Heartbreak Hotel. The director replied. It's not a very common phenomenon, although they are on the increase, I believe.
Jane peered, and again the thing became obvious. There was one big blue dot, she observed, and lots of little pink dots, which had torn away from their ordained pairings and followed the blue dot like iron filings with a magnet. She frowned involuntarily. She knew the feeling. In fact, she had a shrewd notion she knew the blue dot concerned. Nigel something used to work in accounts. Narrator's note. See, it's the accounts. A scourge of my life, I tell you. I'm always going to get it reading Tom Holt, but but then again, that's a bit of hypocrisy, because, I mean, obviously I used to work in accounts, so I was probably the same. Oh, heaven help me. Right, I digress.
And over here, the director said, we've got the mainframe computer, which we use to plot out the various conjunctions and configurations before we put them up on the screen. In the old days, of course, we used to have to do it all by hand. It made life terribly simple.
You mean, Jane said, complicated, surely?
For the clients, I mean.
The director replied austerely.
We just didn't have the capacity, you see. With the result that far and away the most common basic configuration, right up to about 50 years ago, was the absolutely basic BMG/BMG/HEA simplex.
I'm sorry?
Boy meets girl, /boy marries girl, /happily ever after.
The director translated.
Millions of them, all dull and boring like that. Simply because we didn't have the facilities. Now, of course, it's completely different, thanks to this little box of tricks here.
He patted the computer affectionately.
This is only the 3rd generation, of course. By the time we've got the 6th generation installed and operational, we're hoping to be able to extend our service to the entire mortal population.
And
of course, the director said, the marvellous thing is that the computer never sleeps. Which means that even now, when the department has closed down for the night and everybody has gone home, the little black box is still awake, twitching a wire here, nudging a client into adultery here, on a 24-hour, round-the-clock basis anyway, he said, switching off the screen and putting the lid back on the console. That should give you an idea of the sort of work we do here. We're only a small department, but I think I can say we're a happy one.
He gazed self-containedly over Jane's head at a spot on the darkened wall.
I always say, he continued, that it's one of the few departments in the whole of the service where you can point to an end result and lay your hand on your heart and say to yourself with pride, I did that.
Yes, he added.
I confidently expect that you're going to enjoy working here.
Yes, said Jane grimly. I rather think I am.
Dun dun dun. So, how's that going to work out for her?
Next chapter's going to be a hefty one. It's probably going to be, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 pages. Well, actually, it's not too bad. It's just longer than the other ones have been. So it'll be about half an hour, 45 minutes, I imagine. But yes, the chapters are kind of like getting bigger now. Yeah. And as I said, we're going to hopefully start about 10 a.m. GMT on Christmas Day. If it's successful, we might do it on Boxing Day as well, or we could do it on New Year's Day, or even just a couple of little piddly poddlies over the sort of like between Christmas and New Year. But I'll take your feedback as it goes, as we go along, and we'll decide what to do, and we'll decide together, because that's how we do things here. If you have got any other preferences of stories to read on Christmas Day, by all means, please let me know. I'm going to look and see if there's some more funny short stories I can find, or even something from Reddit, I don't know, just something like that. But as I said, there's other people do it a lot better than I do. And on that note, have a look at Hairbear1225's channel. He's flipping brilliant. Yes. And you'll find him in my comment section anyway. So just like give him a nudge and have a look, see at his stuff that he does, because he's really quite talented. Yes. And if we're really lucky, he might even drop in and do a guest spot on Christmas Day or another one of me live reads. I'll get him doing it one day. You know, like we can sort of like double up and like share a story. We've done it before, quite successfully too. Hey, back in the day. So, anyway, I'm going to stop whiffling because this was only a short chapter and I'm hoping in a couple of days... Sorry, pardon my language. It might have to be tomorrow because Thursday I've got an appointment. And yeah, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, hopefully we'll be able to read. There's me thinking out loud. I might be able to do so on Thursday. It depends how tiring it is, but it's Thursday afternoon, so we shall see what we shall see. Show my lovely beans, my little cherry pies, my absolute petals, my little gorgeous. Okay, my lovelies, please take care of yourselves. If you're cold, wrap up warm. If you're too hot, please hydrate. But most of all, stay safe. And I'll see you in a couple of days, Petal. Or even tomorrow, you never know. You never know. Keep your eyes peeled. I'll be coming around the corner or something. I don't know. Take it easy, Petal.